Hi, it's Andrew from Acuity Auto-Redact. Welcome to the Data Protection Weekly podcast, where we wrap up all the biggest issues affecting data protection professionals in the UK each week. So, with the 19th of June deadline for all organisations to have an internal data protection complaints process and procedure in place, I thought today is a good chance to reflect on what can make this a really smooth transition and change for us all. For those of you who aren't massive data protection geeks, the rules will be changing on the 19th of June so that if you have a data protection complaint, you need to take it to the organization that's been processing your data protection request rather than just go straight to the Information Commissioner's Office, which was the previous way in which people were directed to handle complaints. Now, this in a way empowers us as data protection professionals because it means that we're not constantly worried that the ICO is going to be dealing with every single possible complaint if somebody isn't fully happy with how you've redacted a DSAR or in terms of how you've processed any data protection request. But it does mean that we need to make sure that everything is in place to make it a smooth transition, and that we need to look at how we get systems in place ahead of that so that it doesn't become a burden on our workloads as data protection professionals. So, what things can we do to make sure that this process and this transition is as smooth as possible? Well, firstly, the thing you need to consider is what's your front door for a complaint. So somebody's got a complaint with a data protection issue, they've put in a DSAR, they're not happy with how you've redacted it. Where should they go to complain? And this should be as easy as possible. You need to provide something that's easily accessible. So one way would be just to have an inbox, an email address on your website or a form on your website that someone fills in and it goes to a dedicated mailbox that deals with that issue. So that's one way in which you could make this a pretty decent success, just to make sure you've got a very clearly written email address that people can contact. It's really prominent on your website. And as well, maybe if you fancy a form on the website to fill in that's very clear in terms of a pro forma that keeps it together. My preference is always to have a form if you can, because you can guide the responses and you can put drop down boxes in so that people really express what the issue is. So there's less risk of ambiguity. There's obviously going to be some risk, there's going to be some free text fields, but there's ways in which you can deal with it and make sure it's logged properly. As well as that, you have to acknowledge that you've received the complaint and are dealing with it. So if you send a reply manually to say, hey, I've got your response and I'll be dealing with it within the 30-day window, that could work. But you could also set up an automated response on the mailbox or on the form to trigger an email response that says, we've got your response. We will process it in line with the 30-day rule. Don't worry, we're on it. A bit like an IT ticketing desk or a ticketing service request that you might get on a support service. That can just give that little bit of confidence that there's a smooth process in place, and it eliminates that risk of human error if somebody doesn't respond to say, I'm dealing with it, because the last thing you want to do is not appear to be transparent with the process. So you might be dealing with the request, but if the acknowledgement isn't consistent, that it's being received and you're dealing with it, that could be a potential issue. So that's just something just to consider about. The other responsibility you have is to resolve without undue delay. So it's worth having a process in place for how you will resolve the actual situation. Who is the person who will give that transparency and that confidence that they're going to independently review the complaint? Because if it's the data protection officer reviewing their own complaint against them, that's not going to go down very well. So making sure that you know immediately as soon as it comes in that there's somebody independent who isn't involved with the DPO process, who's going to come in and really check that everything's been done properly and really try to resolve the complaint. Might be that they want to, maybe the independent person thinks actually some more information could have been included. It has been missed. You want to make sure that person exists and knows what to do and is ready to step in. As well as that, systems that will be done. So, like, what is the policy if they say, I think there's information missing? How does that internal person validate that claim? What access do they get? If they don't have that access already, is there a procedure for the information governance professional or the IT department to very quickly open up access so that those people can get access to the data that they need to review the complaint? The last thing you're going to want is to go, oh wow, this person needs access to these mailboxes to validate that nothing was missing, and they're going to need access to these files and this information. You want it to be smooth to say, hey, independent person in the organization, please review these files. I'll point you in the right direction, and to talk through the process. And as well as that, to give them access to your audits from the request that you did so that it's at hand and very easy to do. It's almost worth doing a black box exercise on the next data protection request you service. Imagine there's a complaint and what you need to give access to, and go back through your historical events. Imagine there was a complaint next to each of them. What would be the process in the system that would give an independent person in your organization access to everything they need to quality assure the process, and potentially flag that things weren't done to the satisfaction of the person who's raised the complaint, and how you're going to fix it? Role playing can help rather than dealing with the actual problem. The other thing to remember is that the Secretary of State can request access to all of the data protection requests that you've handled and every complaint that's come in. So they can ask to review the complaints to check they've been done properly. If they're not happy, if the subject isn't happy with how you've processed it, they can still escalate to the ICO. So you need to make sure that you've got a stable and clear system for logging every complaint, what the complaint was, everything that was submitted, that it was resolved in time, and everything that was done to try to resolve the complaint. So if they do escalate it, you can go, oh, this is what we did, this is what we changed, this is how we tried to meet the requests from their complaint better, or unfortunately we disagreed with their complaint because of these reasons. You need to make sure you have a system in place. That could be a spreadsheet. It could be that you're going to handle this with a ticketing system, so it's nice and organized. Or it could be you're going to create a little database that has this information in. But it's really important that that's set up. And then the next thing as well is your privacy notices. So you're going to be obviously dealing with this new legal reality. So you need to make it very clear that you will be keeping information that's come in through internal complaints procedures, and what data you will be collecting in your data protection form that people fill in to lodge a complaint. Again, it's an easy one to overlook, isn't it? Because it's, oh, I've got to update the privacy policy again, but it is something that needs to be done. Um, not as vital immediately, it might not seem, as doing the things like getting the processes in place, getting the systems in place. But if you mess it up and someone isn't happy with how you handle data, it can be a real sting if they say, well, actually, you aren't handling complaints in line with your privacy policy, particularly if someone isn't happy with how you've handled the original issue that they came to be redressed. So it is a very important thing to make sure you get right. It might not seem it at first. It's always that thing that gets put on the back burner, but don't let it. So they were my 5 top tips for making sure the process goes smoothly with this new transition for the 19th of June. Having a really easy to access front door, email form, or an email address prominent on the website. Replying as quickly as possible, ideally an automated reply, to make it clear that 30-day time is going ahead. Making sure that you've got a process internally to address the complaint, that you've written that out, that you've really maybe even role played how that will look, so you've stress tested that it's ready to go, that you are absolutely logging everything about the complaints that you need to, so you've got a record if it's ever challenged, but also making sure that your privacy notices reflect that that will be happening as well, so it's really transparent. Okay, so hopefully everyone is now ready for the 19th of June. I think if not, we've got a couple of months, we've got 2 months to get everything in place. So we should, as always, as we always step up to these changes, be in a good position by then. Finally, just before I sign off, just a reminder that we also run Acuity Auto-Redact. I'm also the founder of that service. It's an automated AI tool that scans your documents for any personally identifiable information and events, signatures, anything that you would need to redact in a DSAR. But it also puts you in the driving seat so you control how it works. It can rapidly speed up the DSAR process. So, if you're interested, give us a look at acuityautoredact.com. Okay, thank you. And I hope everybody has a great week. And I am looking forward to coming back next week with some more data protection issues for us to discuss. Thank you.
Data protection, we